Hey guys, so today we're going to talk about multiplying decimals, and there's going to be two ways that we're going to do that. So the first method is we are going to use an estimate. So that's why I said the other day when we were doing that the estimate lesson that that was going to be important. So if we're using method one, the use an estimate method, our first step is that we're going to make an estimate for the problem. Step number two, we're going to multiply as if those numbers that are now decimals, we're going to pretend that they're whole numbers, and we're just going to multiply those out any way we know how, whether it's lattice method or traditional multiplication, the old lady way, or if you guys are using the box method, whichever method you're comfortable with multiplying whole numbers. Once we have that, we're going to do step number three. We're going to use our estimate to place a decimal. So let's take a look at this first example that I have up here. I have 76 1/10 times 9 6/10. So we need to make an estimate for this. So I would take this 76.1, and I would round that to 76. I'm going to take this 9.6 and I'm going to round that to 10. I'm going to do my basic math fact of 76 times 1 and get 76, add my 0 back in. My estimate for this is 760. Step number two, multiply as if they were whole numbers. So I already did the work for that right here. So I multiplied like it was 761 times 96, and I got 73056. Now, just like we did the other day when we did that estimate lesson, we are going to use our estimate of 760 to place our decimal in this actual answer that we have here. So like I said, just like in that lesson, we have all the digits. Now we need to decide where that decimal goes. And in order for us to get as close as possible to 760, we're going to place our decimal right here between the 0 and the 5. So our actual answer for this would be 730 56 hundredths. I used my estimate to place my decimal in all the digits that I got to get my actual answer when I multiplied out those decimals. The second example I have for you, 189 6/10 times 1 75 hundredths. Again, step number one, I need to make an estimate. And just for the sake of making this easy, I'm going to go ahead and round that 189 6/10 to 200. And I'm going to round my 1 75 hundredths to 2. So if I do that math, I do my basic fact of 2 times 2, which is 4. I add my 2 zeros back in, and my estimate then is 400. Step number two, I multiply as if they were whole numbers, and I did that right here. And I got 331800. Again, I need to get my answer here as close to 400 as possible. If I put my decimal here in front of the first 3, too small. If I put it here between the 2 3s, still too small. If I put it after the second 3, I've only got 33 and something, still too small. I'm going to put it right here between my 1 and my 8 because that gives me an answer of 331, which for the sake of this problem gets us close enough to 400. So my actual answer when I multiply these decimals out is 331. And we can read this as 8/10 or 80 hundredths or 800 thousandths. Either of those are the same. Okay, and my third and final example for method one using an estimate. I have 5 6/10 times 8/10. And if I'm making an estimate, I'm going to round my 5 6/10 to 6. And I'm going to round my 8/10 to 1. So 6 times 1, my estimate is going to be 6. Step number two, multiply as if they were whole numbers. So I'm multiplying 56 times 8. Take out those decimals and just do your multiplication. when I multiply those out, I end up with the digits 448. I'm going to use my estimate of 6 to put my decimal point in my answer for step number 3. And my decimal would make the most sense right here between my two 4s. So the actual answer when we work this problem out is 4 48 hundredths. So method number 2 for multiplying decimals is you count the places after the decimal. It doesn't make much sense until I walk you guys through the steps. So step number 1, you're going to multiply as if they were whole numbers. Multiply the digits like there were no decimal points, just like they were whole numbers. Step number 2, you count the places after the decimal in the problem. And then step number 3, you place that decimal so the same number of places are after the decimal in the answer. So let's look at that one. So I'm going to use the same problems I used for method 1. So I've got 76 1/10 times 9 6/10. In step number 1, I'm going to multiply those decimals as if they were whole numbers. So I did that right here, and I came up with 73056. Now, step number 2, count the number of places after the decimal in the problem. So I have my decimal point, and I have one place here. I have my decimal point, and I have one place here. Total, I have 2 places after the decimal point in my problem. So I have to do the same thing to place the decimal in my answer. I count 2 places and put my decimal. I have 2 places after the decimal in my problem. I have 2 places after the decimal in my answer. So again, with method number 2, the answer for this problem works out to be 730 56 hundredths. All right, and for our second example, I have 189 6/10 times 1 75 hundredths. Step number 1, multiply as if they were whole numbers. I have done all of my multiplication the old lady way, just because that's what I'm used to. I'm the old lady, that's how I do it. But like I said, you guys can do whatever method you need to do. Lattice, the box method, the old lady way, whatever you need to do to come up with the correct digits to multiply those decimals as if they were whole numbers. Step number 2, I'm going to count the places after the decimal in the problem. I have 1 place here. I have 2 places here. So total in the problem, I've got 3 places after my decimal, which means that in my digits here, I need to have 1, 2, 3 digits after my decimal. 331 8/10. You can include these zeros. You don't need to, since those are the zeros at the end. Those zeros don't change the answer whether you have them or not. So you can either leave it at 331.8 or you can add in those zeros afterwards. Okay guys, the final example, 5 6/10 times 8/10. Step number 1, multiply as if they were whole numbers. So I did that, and I got 448 for my digits. I'm going to count the places after the decimal in the problem. 5.6 has 1, 0.8 has 1, so altogether in my problem, there's 2 places after the decimal. Place the decimal so that there are the same number of places after the decimal in the answer. 1, 2. I'm going to place my decimal right there. 4 48 hundredths is my answer for that. So there's 2 different ways that I just showed you for multiplying decimals. When you guys are actually practicing these problems, I don't care what method you use, just like anything that we do, whatever method makes the most sense to you. Like I said, you don't have to use the old lady way here. You can use whatever way you need to do your multiplication that you're most comfortable with. I don't care if you use method 1, use method 2, whatever floats your boat, just as long as you guys are getting the right answer. So the next thing I want you guys to do is I want you guys to go ahead and do the math boxes that I have set up for you guys in Canvas. It should be as a Canvas quiz. So go ahead and do those. And if you guys have any questions either about those math boxes or today's lesson, just reach out to me and we'll get those questions answered for you.